Okay. Dear friends across the globe, good day. My name is Fernando Gomez. I have the privilege to be involved with a series of initiatives in the energy and materials space here at the World Economic Forum. And on behalf of the forum and the partners with whom we are working in this major effort called the Mission Possible platform, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to this materials industry session. I see thousands of participants in this online event, and you're joining from all over the world. And I don't know your specific location, but I would like to ask you to just take a moment, no matter where you are, and look around you. The built environment where you are, the clothes you're wearing, the electronic device that you're using to access this session. Clearly, your world and our world is a materials world, and that world that you just saw around you is the result of a number of industries transforming raw materials into shelter, into roads, into consumer goods. But there are a couple of important things about those transformations that these industries make every day. Number one is they will continue to deliver indispensable socioeconomic well-being in the future. And they have so far, and they'll continue to be there. But the second is that to continue delivering that, they will require energy, lots. And at least until today, that energy means high emissions. And that's the reason why we talk about a transition of these industries into a different realm. Now, we say transition because it's a major overhaul of what we have been doing for a long time. And we say accelerating as well because very paced steps may take us somewhere, but not necessarily to the major transformation that we're talking about. It requires an acceleration. So the Mission Possible platform is a space exactly for that. The leaders across all stakeholder groups to come together to build that collective vision, to commit, and more importantly, to enable that, to make it happen. Our colleagues in this panel will tell us how they are facing this, their vision, and the steps they're taking towards this transformation. So with that, I welcome you all, and I would like to leave you with Bronwyn Nielsen, who is going to facilitate the session, joining us from South Africa. Bronwyn, thank you so much, and welcome.
Thank you very much, Fernando, for that introduction to our session. We're certainly in for a robust discussion today. And just formally again, we're looking at the materials industry transition, building forward at speed and scale. Now, we've previously heard about the critical role that industry must play if we're to meet the Paris Climate Agreement objectives and net zero globally by 2050. Now, if we had a very insightful session on heavy duty transport just before this, and in that session, we examined a number of themes. We're going to build on Industry Transition Day and now deep dive into the journey that the materials industries need to continue taking towards that net zero emissions. And perhaps we just put a couple of stats on the table and we go back to 2018. The aluminium, cement, chemicals, and steel industries, recognized as the harder to abate sectors, accounted for 5.8 gigatons of CO2 emissions. Now, just to put that into context, that's 68% of all industry emissions and accounts for more than 16% of total global emissions. If no action is taken, emissions from these sectors could double by mid-century. And as demand for these industry products is expected to increase substantially due both to population growth and the need for materials to support the low carbon economy, these industries face important questions on how to meet this demand and while significantly reducing their direct and indirect emissions. Now we're going to explore the challenges that the steel, aluminium, chemical, and cement industries are facing in decreasing those very emissions. And we're also going to identify in the second half of our discussion the public-private and cross-industry collaborations needed to accelerate the journey of the materials industries towards those net zero emissions. A couple of ground rules before we get started. The session is being live streamed and will be recorded. It is open to the press. Please could participants keep themselves on mute when other speakers are engaging, just so that we can monitor our virtual platform at this point. And then also, if I could kindly ask the speakers to keep to their allocated times in order to allow each of the panelists to contribute equally to the discussions. Before we go into and deep dive into the content of our discussion, I'm going to introduce you to the Slido platform. You can go to slido.com and you either scan the QR code, which will give you direct access, or you can, as I said, go to slido.com #IndustryTransitionDay. And we are now going to go into a discussion point where I'm going to put a key question to all of you. It's important that we have your participation at this stage. So hoping that you have managed to get into Slido, and you will now see on that application on either your smartphone or your any smart device that you're operating on, the question that we will put to you is, of course, of all the below necessary actions to drive the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in the materials industries, which one do you believe has the greatest potential to accelerate their transition? Access to cheap renewable energy, development of new production technologies, development of truly circular material cycles, financial levers, carbon pricing or taxation mechanisms, and policy or regulatory levers. And we'll be polling those. As you can see now, we've got access to cheap renewable energy coming in at 28%, dropping slightly there. We seem to have still holding its own, access to cheap renewable energies at 24%. So policy is certainly leading on this. And we can see that if we go further down, we've got the policy and regulatory levers definitely leading as per what we can see on the poll. So without further ado, let's go into introducing our panelists and also just reflecting on those results. All of those levers can play a major role in supporting the decarbonization of heavy industries in different ways. And of course, which one can be most impactful differs per sector and makes the transition to net zero complex for companies and policymakers. Right, without further ado, my first panelist, Mahendra Singhi, is the CEO of Dalmia Cement India. Now, Dalmia Cement is one of the most active and innovative climate leaders in the Indian business world and part of the leadership group for industry transition. I am joined also by Jörg Unger, Senior Vice President, Corporate Technology and Operational Excellence at BASF Germany. BASF is the largest chemicals producer in the world and has been one of the sector's leaders in addressing the sector's greenhouse gas emissions. Welcome. We're joined by Amélie Hennion, Managing Director of Aluminium Dunkirk, Alvins. And Aluminium Dunkirk is the largest aluminium smelter in Europe, and together with its parent company, Alvins, has been working actively in improving aluminium's carbon footprint. We have Nikita Vorobyev, Environmental Affairs Director, NLMK Group, Russian Federation. NLMK is the largest steel producer in Russia and exports its products across the globe to over 30 countries. And Cedric Demus is head of Group Public Affairs and Government Relations at Lafarge Holcim. Lafarge is one of the best-known building materials companies with a large cement business and has been leading the sector's decarbonization efforts. Right, so if we go into our first, as I said, we're breaking this up into two parts. And the first part of our discussion is really understanding where all of these specific industries are in their decarbonization journey. The first overarching question is, as I've said, how far is your industry on the path towards net zero emissions? And what are the biggest challenges to be addressed? And Jorg, we're going to start with you in this discussion. The chemical industry is highly complex and has become very fragmented in the last 10 to 20 years. Can you help us understand where the bulk of chemical emissions is coming from and what the industry is doing to directly address this challenge? Perhaps how far are you from achieving net zero emissions as an industry? Jorg.
Yeah, thank you, Bronwyn. I will try my very best. So first of all, you're right. The chemical industry provides a broad range of materials. And this broad range of materials is created in integrated value chains. And these value chains, they are rooting in a relatively small number of fundamental building blocks. For example, olefins, aromatics, and ammonia. And these building blocks, almost like Lego blocks, are then used to assemble more complex materials that provide the desired properties and functionalities. Therefore, and this is specific for the chemical industry, the carbon footprint within the chemical sector strongly depends on where you are in this chain. Therefore, it is difficult to really come up with one commitment of the entire chemical industry. Rather, we have to tackle it from a company or group of company subsector approach. Why is that? Particularly the production of these building blocks that I mentioned from different raw materials is very energy intensive. And this is the root of our CO2 intensity. Oil and gas are particularly attractive raw materials because they can be used as both the raw material at one end and the energy source. In today's petrochemical processes, the production of the building blocks is driven by internal combustion by a portion of the raw materials. This has proven to be very, very efficient and is the foundation for the highly profitable petrochemical and plastics industry. Clearly, the internal combustion also creates CO2. So there is no way around that. And this will add cost to our balance sheets and will also probably not in the future be further accepted by public and regulators. So for these reasons, we have some challenges and we have derived some action areas. First, we need new production technologies, which really decouple the energy supply from the raw material we use. Therefore, we develop new technologies that allow for the use of green energy instead of internal combustion. Second, we need to ensure access to sufficient green energy in an increasingly volatile electricity market. We do require relatively large quantities, but in principle, we can offer buffering capabilities by coupling the electricity grid with our material value chain grid. As an industry, we are actively exploring the opportunities and constraints of this so-called chemical electrical interface with the energy supply and distribution energies. Third, the use of renewable feedstock really enables a carbon neutral footprint. However, to enable a net zero footprint, we also have to get involved in the circular economy. Therefore, we actively support circular economy solutions that keep carbon in the loop and avoid carbon leakage. Our recently founded Alliance to End Plastic Waste is a visible sign of our commitment. Conceptually, all three areas might appear straightforward, but making them happen in practice is really a challenge within and beyond our industry. Our current technology and asset base is highly efficient, but capital intensive. New technologies will not only require development, they also require the support by regulators and financial communities, because new technologies are most likely less competitive than the existing technologies. So early movers clearly have a disadvantage and will be driven out of business if not supported. Nevertheless, I do see the chemical industry as an opportunity. We can offer a lot to a future net zero industry because we can serve as a value-adding tool to manage our volatile energy supply demand balances on the one hand, and secondly, we can reduce carbon leakage by closing the loop for a broad range of materials, building blocks, and functionalities that we deliver. That's it.
Amelie, let's turn to the aluminium industry, which is obviously well known for its recyclability and being lightweight, therefore reducing fuel consumption. Nevertheless, the production of aluminium is also known for its intensive energy usage. And as the largest aluminium smelter in Europe, how are you specifically addressing this energy challenge?
Yeah, thank you. As you rightly pointed, we're known to be energy intensive, and we also have the issue of our own process that generates CO2. So we've got a double challenge on that front. So I'll tackle one and then the other. On the first, the process aspect, just a couple of numbers. We have a range of producers that are between 1.8 and 2.8 tons of CO2 per ton of aluminium. We have the chance of being benchmarked in that field at our smelter, and that has been going through process improvement through years. Now, if we look at technology, how can we reduce that on the process side? Everyone's been on a quest actually to look for the solution, and it requires a complete change in the chemical process. There's one player in the industry that's actually seeking that opportunity, that's called ELYSIS, with a new technology. It would be breakthrough. That's called inert anodes. So it would actually remove the CO2 process. It would be a completely different one. So until they actually prove that process to be feasible on an industrial scale, we have no solution in terms of process. So we're doing marginal improvements, but we don't have the answer yet. So process-wise, it's either we suppress completely the carbon or we capture it. And carbon capture is still, far from providing a complete solution to our industry. So we'll have to keep working in parallel on those ones. The other source will be the electricity we use. And some of us have the chance of having zero carbon coming from the energy because we come from low carbon, sources of power. We're partially decarbonized at Dunkirk, which is a great advantage. Some have hydro power sources, so makes them also very competitive on that front. And others in the world have up to 15 tons of CO2 that adds to the process side. So all the players in this industry are working on both. Our total is 2.3 tons of CO2 per ton of aluminum, which is pretty low. So we keep working on power sourcing and on the technology side, which are the two levers. Recycling is also one, which is, you simply don't make the aluminum first. It still is energy intensive, and it needs to be developed mostly with our clients' to achieve the desired quality and the real carbon improvement. It needs to be done properly. So there's still a lot to be done on that front, and it will provide some benefits.
Nikita.
Bronwyn, we cannot hear you.
Apologies for that. Thank you very much. So turning our attention now to the steel industry, and Nikita, bringing you in at this point. The demand for steel is expected to grow by 30% until 2050. And if no action is taken by the middle of the century, the stat is that steel could account for 8% of total global emissions. So it's an internationally traded commodity, obviously, and we've got to look at what some of the key hurdles are that the sector needs to overcome to collectively meet the Paris Agreement. Nikita.
Yes, thank you, Bronwyn, and hello, everyone. So the global energy consumption and CO2 emissions per ton of crude steel have already been halved since 1960s. So we already made some way through, and we've had a whole new part of the industry emerging. Steel made through electric arc furnaces, which recycle scrap So it's becoming more and more recycled product. And its carbon intensity is already 4 to 5 times lower than that of the traditional steel produced through the so-called integrated route. And today, this new route represents about 30% of the global steel production. And here it's important to mention two things about steel. Well, first of all, Bronwyn, as you already mentioned, it's one of the most traded commodity products. And since it is produced and sold globally, it's increasingly important to take collective measures to reduce CO2 emissions. And second is that steel is fully recyclable. It doesn't lose its characteristics or qualities when being recycled, and thus it's a crucial part of the circular economy and indeed net zero transition. So in terms of what measures have already been implemented by the industry, it's the hydrogen use as a reducing agent, which helps to significantly reduce CO2 emissions even in the traditional production routes. It's of course the use of CCUS technologies, which is costly but yet also efficient. It's an increased use of biomass as a reducing agent as well to substitute coal in our production. And it's again something that is helping the industry to transition quickly. What are the challenges? Well, I wouldn't be unique in saying that the renewable energy availability is by far number one. And Europe alone would need about 400 terawatt hours of CO2-free electricity by 2050. That's 7 times more than the sector produces today. And that is, the European steel sector is less than 10% of the global production, so you can understand the scale. Second is, of course, the technical challenges in introducing carbon neutral technologies at the existing sites. We have dozens of pilots running worldwide at this point, but a truly global scale is yet a challenge. And third is, of course, the cost. Total cost of production will rise by 35 to 100% per ton of steel by 2050. And that's the cost of using new technologies and more energy. And of course, that cost has to be bared both by producers and by consumers, and that's indeed a challenge. Thank you very much.
Cedric, let's bring you in from your perspective now. And again, just putting some stats on the table, around half the emissions from cement are process emissions. And this is a principal reason that cement emissions are often considered difficult to cut. If I can add to that, since CO2 is released by a chemical reaction, it cannot be eliminated by changing fuel or increasing efficiency. How is the cement industry, Cedric, particularly overcoming this challenge?
Okay, thank you, Brownie, for the question. It's a very broad and complex one, and I can't speak on behalf of the sector, but I think it's fair to say that today we have technologies. We have technologies that exist and can be expanded, such as a fossil fuel substitution. It's part of it, but not the whole solution. We have solutions in development, such as carbon capture and storage, carbon capture and use, and we have technologies that require cross-sectoral partnerships that are currently being envisaged. And all of these can be used to achieve carbon neutrality. If you look at certain regions in Europe, the European cement industry released its 2050 roadmap, which shows how these technologies can be used to achieve carbon neutrality across the value chain. Now, there's one thing we're still missing, which is the business case. The business case for carbon neutrality, the business case for investing massively into these technologies and the deployment of these technologies, the business case for investing in this technological transition. And what do I mean by the business case? For instance, you need to incentivize these technology transition. Carbon capture and usage, if it's not incentivized, it's not going to be bankable, and projects will not emerge at the pace and scale that is required. Another example of the business case is the need for a level playing field on carbon costs with importers. Unless we have that level playing field on carbon costs, it's difficult to build a business case. And all of this will require an unprecedented collaboration between industry and governments to build up the legislative and regulatory framework that will enable that transition, and that will give us the business case to go faster, further. And the last point, Ronnie, I would like to make is that of the value chain. In several parts of the world, we have launched carbon neutral concretes onto the market. We need to build up the demand, because the demand remains niche at the moment. So that needs a transformation in the collaboration and the relationship we have with our value chain, and the way customers and actors alongside the value chain behave and integrate carbon neutrality in their thinking, in their behavior, in their decision making. And how do we do that? And that is through public procurement, building codes and standards. Carbon pricing will probably require a different form of carbon pricing that it really embeds into a decision making across value chain. So all of that needs to be considered to build a business case.
Let's turn our attention now to the cement industry. And Mahindra, I'm going to ask you to come in here. Of course, Dalmia Cement is a member of the leadership group for industry transition, and that's led by India and Sweden. So how is the Indian industry, would be the fair question here, advancing their transition to net zero emissions? Mahindra.
Happy morning, happy afternoon, and happy evening to all. Namaskar. Thanks, Bronwyn. And it's a very interesting question. You know, like one, the proactive and positive efforts of Dalmia Cement on carbon neutrality has been very well recognized, and that is how we are member of this India-Sweden transition group. Secondly, many of the European countries, they have taken roadmap, they have created roadmap for going to net zero by half of the century. But still, what we find is that the industrial sectors, they have not come out with their roadmap, that how, whether it's steel or aluminium or cement or aviation, they would reach to that level. So that is in process. Now, to answer your specific question, the industry in India, they are broadly aware, but at the same time, the awareness, like from low carbon to the net zero carbon, I would say candidly, not only in India, but in most of the developing countries, that awareness is not there. This message of net zero, it has come up in, say, last few months or so, and I think it will take up. But at the same time, the good part is that the Indian government and few of the leading companies of India, they are fully aware of it. Indian government has taken many policy initiatives by supporting renewable energy, by supporting various other measures like e-mobility, etc., which can bring down. But at the same time, there are only very few companies in each sector. And if I take just name of few companies like Tata Steel, Mahindra and Mahindra Group, or Hindalco, or SpiceJet, or our company Dalmia Cement. So there are only few leaders who have started working on low carbon transition. Only thing which I can share here is that our company Dalmia Cement is one of the company who have targeted for carbon negative by 2040. And we are quite happy and thankful to ETC and Lord Turner and few other organizations on the support of which we could visualize that there are the technologies, because so far our organization has the lowest carbon footprints in the world, 525 kg per ton of cement against 900 kg global average. But at the same time, the challenges before steel sector, aluminum sector, or cement sector is that how to implement certain technologies which are in our vision. Like our minister had said earlier in the morning, that there are few countries and companies which have means but not the will. There are few companies and countries which have will but not the means. So we as a company of India, we have the vision, we have the will but not the means. So the major challenge which is required to be addressed is how to create some demonstration projects for certain technologies which are breakthrough. So like this, my friend Cedric said that carbon capture and utilization. Now, until and unless that is made business case, that is demonstrated to the industry that this can be one of the major game changer for the industry, nothing would come out. So like we have reached to a certain level, but now to reach to net zero, we would need a demonstration project which can be funded by a Global Carbon Fund or any MDBs. You know, you are aware that as per Paris Climate Agreement, developed country was supposed to support developing country by more than 100 billion a year. But without that support, the technologies which are in know-how of Indian industry, it's not coming up. So the few more challenges: one, the right policies in India and developing countries to further promote renewable energy. Secondly, how this fossil fuel can be replaced, one, by biomass or alternate fuel. And one of the projects which we have suggested for the, not our industry, but everyone, is how to plant energy plants like bamboo, etc., on the wasteland and unused land, so that that also acts as sequestration also, as well as the replacement of fossil fuel.
Mahendra, I just want to bring the audience in here. Thank you so much for that. I want to bring the audience in here. Obviously, key is interactivity with our audience, and we have got questions coming through from Slido. Just remembering, if you want to join us here, you can scan the QR code or go to www.slido.com and enter the code industry, #industry transition day. So an important question coming through: who will pay the price of green products in developing countries? Steel will become twice costlier. Same is the case with cement. So who will bear the cost? Who would like to come in here? Nikita?
Yes.
Mahendra, go ahead. Maybe we can just do a round circle on all of you on this one. Mahendra.
Sure. So I would say that initially there would be a big cost. So that's why investment would be required to be funded by MDBs and all this. But in long term, I can definitely assure, and which we have shown to the whole world, that the philosophy of clean and green is profitable and sustainable. So maybe after 3 years, after 5 years, 7 years, whatever benefits you get by capturing CO2, by replacement of fuel, etc., that would pay back, and the cement would not be expensive.
Nikita, let's get a response here from you.
Sure, I would actually like to echo Mahindra. Mahindra, I think that, you know, a one-time cost would definitely be there, and as I mentioned in my initial speech, it would have to be split between the consumers and producers. That's for sure. Perhaps the government can intervene at this point as well and provide some support to reduce that cost to the public. But in the longer term, again, as we can enlarge the life cycle of the material industry, we can definitely make it more sustainable and not just cleaner, but also cheaper. That's also.
Amelie, let's get a sense from you here.
Sure, I'll be along the same lines as my co-panelists. I think you know, it'll take a lot of public policies to enable that. Both supporting the initial investment. I think right now, as some pointed out, and the same in our industry, the barriers to entry on some of the technology is really high. So, you know, it'll take support for the very long-term investments. I also agree that consumers will have to bear some of the costs. I hear the question about, you know, developing countries. I think same, you know, there'll need to be some support for those countries in particular so that they don't lag behind in terms of decarbonization.
Jörg, a response from you, and then Cedric, I would like you to conclude on this round.
Very simple answer, Brandon. Everybody. The question is, how do we share it? And this will be the task on hand, because whatever we do will be more costly. As a society and as industries, we were used to digging something out of the ground, keeping the value and releasing something into the atmosphere without any cost. And this is changing. So the big question is, how do we share this additional cost coming into the equation? And this really requires then the financial industry to think about it, the industry, the actually producing industry to think about it, the consumers to think about it, the regulator, because in the end it will be more cost and we have to share it in a balanced way. Stronger shoulders will have to carry more and weaker shoulders less. But the question is how to define this. And this, I think, is a very important piece in the discussion.
And Cedric, if you could just come in before we move to collaboration and the second half of our discussion in the materials industry.
The carbon neutrality agenda is a societal agenda. Carbon neutrality across the economy means that the carbon cost must start to be embedded in the products and services that we provide. And that requires carbon pricing schemes to be developed and that embed both the emissions and the consumption. And here the role of policymakers is fundamental to enable a transition towards that, so that it doesn't create economic shock neither on the production side nor on the consumption side.
Right, so we have 24 minutes left for our discussion. And as I said, we're turning now to the second part, which is about collaboration. And if we look at the critical dimension of this panel, it has to be public-private collaboration. And this, of course, is not unique to the materials sector. It is something that we are driving across the broader discussion points on driving for zero emissions. So if we look at, and we start here with Mahindra, let's go back to Dalmia Cement. And as mentioned before, India is leading the leadership group for industry transition. How can public-private partnership help your industry to achieve climate objectives? And could you illustrate how this collaboration works in India? Again, if I can bring you down to around 3 minutes on your response, sir. Thank you.
Sure. Definitely, until unless there's a collaboration, nothing new can come out. And collaboration of countries are required, collaboration of industries are required, and collaboration of certain societies are required. So one of the important platform is this Mission Possible, which has been come out, which has converted the fundamental of the industry from hard to abate to possible to abate, and now the Mission Possible. Now the government, the industry, the financial institutions, and the MDBs, they all have to come together and create certain projects by which one can, again, I'll repeat the same, so that they can demonstrate certain projects by which it can be shown to the industry that if certain investments are made in these technologies, then definitely it has potential to bring down CO2 emissions. And ultimately, like in India now, when we have targeted a carbon negative roadmap of 2040, there are 4 major levers. One major lever is renewable energy by replacing thermal energy. Government of India is supporting in a big way. So there is a close interaction and cooperation between Indian government, the technology suppliers, and the Dalmia Cement. Second is with the agriculture sector, government, and the industry, that how to put up energy plants. And now the third and most important would be the carbon capture and utilization, like earlier just said, that it's a 50% of the emissions which comes out, and until unless carbon gets captured as well, it gets utilized as a raw material. And now there, the industry collaboration of chemical industries and other industries, as well as cement industry and finance industry.
Mahindra, I want to pick up on that, coming back, and actually just a small correction. We're going to go to 2 minutes in terms of right of response on each of these questions. Cedric, let's pick up on that carbon capture, utilization and storage. It's one of the key technologies required for addressing CO2 emissions in the cement industry. Both the oil and gas, as well as the chemical industry, are working on it. So what other aspects could be addressed in cross-industry collaboration? Cedric.
Yes.
Look, what we need is many more large-scale projects that bring different industry, different sectors across all the 3 routes. We either use carbon capture for geological storage, We capture for using carbon as a feedstock, or we capture to remineralize the carbon. We need projects across the three routes, and the three routes need to be incentivized in order to render these projects bankable and make sure that more and more of these projects are emerging. We've announced 2 in Europe. We need, it's not enough, we need more. The second point I would like to make is that if you look, for example, at the geological storage, if that is to happen on a large scale, this is an issue which is much bigger than the cement industry. We need a massive rollout of carbon transport infrastructure. We need a broad-based acceptance, societal acceptance for carbon geological storage. And this is bigger than ourselves. This is bigger than just a sector. This is a societal transition that needs to be enabled through the political system with society and across different sectors.
Nikita, let's come in here. And companies such as NLMK are developing their corporate strategies regarding addressing their respective environmental impact. Where do you see strong opportunities for the steel sector to collaborate in this space?
Yes, thank you, Bronwyn. I see a number of opportunities. Well, first, if you take the intersectoral cooperation, we are already launching the dialogue with a number of oil companies, for what Cedric mentioned about geological storage, and also with chemical companies which can use the CO2 produced by us in their production cycle, which could also be efficient. Also, I think what is important is to find a way to collectively invest in R&D, because that is always costly, and that's not something that just one company can bear or even one sector can bear. Take the R&D in efficiently producing renewable energy. I think that's indeed an intersectoral need, and that should also be supported by the government. If you also take such platforms as Net Zero Initiative supported by WEF, I think it also has its role in describing long-term trends in the carbon-intensive sectors and analyzing the potential to accelerate the transition. So looking not just at the one industry, but at a number of industries and on a global scale. That also helps not just us as an industry, but it also helps our government to understand how all of the industries should transit in order to meet the net zero goal.
So Amelie, we already spoke a bit about the need to address the question around energy usage in the aluminium sector. What other areas do you see in terms of the ability for collaboration?
Well, the energy usage is indeed one, but it is going to come back to each individual's matter. So the technology part is really the one where there can be some collaboration, either across, the industry itself, and in that area, I think, R&D projects carried out together, will help to bridge that gap. Otherwise, it might just take years before we find a solution. So any policy supporting joint R&D, within the sector and then across industries, I think being non-competitors, that should help. Some collaboration. So obviously, carbon capture is one where, as you're mentioning, or others, it's something that we can work on together and have a network, have technologies, and go faster. And also about the acceptance, because it's just moving the issue somewhere else, and it always comes with. I think also our licenses to operate from an environmental point of view are harder to get these days. So it's not just about suppressing. If we move it elsewhere, the public acceptance needs to be built prior to that. So I think those are just examples of how we can go faster. By working across the industry.
You're bringing BASF back into the conversation. The chemical industry supplies chemicals and materials to all manufacturing industries. How can collaboration with your value chain partners help in decreasing emissions associated with your products?
Yeah, and I think I showed before that I think we can have a very, very central role in this. We could be something like the spider in the web between even the material and the energy world. But this requires new types of collaboration, both within our chemical sector, but also beyond with other sectors and the regulator, because we have to share the risk and the burden of this technology transformation. On our end, this means also, again, three elements. First, in order to enable circular economy, we have to get in touch with our customers, the users of our products. We have to come up with materials that are designed for recycling. They work in their intended use, but they have also the capability to be recycled at the end of their life. This requires not only technical solutions, but also regulatory work that allows us to sort, collect, and process waste and transport it in an efficient way. Second, access to green energy, I said, is a key element. And here we really have to work with energy suppliers and with the distributors in a highly regulated and fragmented environment. Lastly, and this is most in our own hands in the chemical industry, we have to come up with new chemical processing technologies, but this also requires new ways of collaborating. First of all, not everybody can be involved in all initiatives to develop all kinds of technologies. So we have to kind of split this up, but then reunite it to really leverage the capability of the entire industry. So lastly, I think the Mission Positive platform for us can really help to foster and facilitate a more holistic view on the future industry landscape. And this is necessary to cope with the challenges on hand. And I think it really helps to establish habits beyond our regular business habits by linking our activities to other industry sectors, the regulator and the finance sector.
I want to bring back our audience participation and a couple of questions coming through on that interactive platform on Slido. Remember, you can go to slido.com and you can register with the hashtag Industry Transition Day. So let's quickly talk about COVID-19, although it's not a quick discussion, but I do want to understand how COVID-19 is impacting this debate. And if I can go across the panel. Mahindra, let me bring you back in here.
Definitely COVID-19 has impacted human activities also, as well as the economic activities also. But as far as our company is concerned, or mainly cement industry is concerned, they could act proactively, and they could also find opportunity in this by having more better relationship with the society, taking care of the people and getting closer to the people. And we followed a philosophy of physical distancing, not social distancing, but social closeness and virtual closeness. At the same time, now there are certain planning that once we are broadly over from COVID-19, that what more efforts has to be taken, because COVID-19 has shown that one pandemic can create such a havoc, but then climate change impact would be more havoc than this pandemic. So now people are aware that yes, we have to change our habits, we have to adapt ourselves to the new normal, which we say better normal.
Amelie, I want you to come in here in terms of COVID-19 and the impact on the industry.
Yeah, so COVID-19 has been, the industry, aluminium industry is characterized by the fact you can't just switch off a smelter and restart it. So our whole industry was not capable of stopping the activity. So everyone kept on going. And I think if we can talk for, our company, we did well through the period by, being very resilient and going very fast to adapt to the situation from, sanitary, measures point of view. We were also helped by the fact that aluminium is necessary and required, for medical supplies, for food wrappings, and a number of things that had to go on as well. So it provides some meaning, to our employees and people to just continue. So that's how we went through. So it just helped to restate our, the requirement for aluminium is there, and that it's quite a resilient industry. So, it gives us hope as to finding other ways to cope with other issues.
And Nikita, bringing it back to how COVID-19 has actually impacted this debate, specifically with regards to your industry.
Yeah, thank you, Bronwyn. Well, I think what it had an impact on the demand, first of all, of course, and that put an additional pressure on the costs on top of the CO2 cost that I mentioned. But at the same time, we also see that it could be a chance for opportunities, and we see that the European Union has not only stopped on its Green Deal push, but actually accelerated its efforts to put Green Deal further, and thus pushing further demand for green steel as well. We are also now looking at the steel not just from the perspective of its final use, but also from the perspective of hygiene and health. And that is also, some new qualities of steel pretty much that we are looking at and developing now that could bring additional value, not just to us as a company or industry, but to the consumers, first of all. So,
Jürgen, I want you to come in as well. And Cedric, just on the COVID-19 element before we move to a closing question.
Cedric?
Go ahead, Jörg.
Okay, maybe just very simply, in the past, globalization was heavily driven by cost of labor and availability of raw material. And I think this is changing. We have a lot of discussion about supply chains, and the topic of local production for local consumption will be different, I think, going forward, also for us as a base material provider to a large scale, to many industries. So I see a change there, subscale, not world scale, but market scale production, and local production for local consumption, local material cycles. I think this will clearly be fostered by the experience we have been going through the last couple of months.
And Cedric, let's close out on this point.
Two small points on my side. The COVID-19 crisis, as far as LafargeHolcim is concerned, has not shifted at all our priorities as far as the carbon agenda is concerned, and our investments. And in fact, we've announced last week a new carbon capture and usage project in Austria. The second element are the green recovery and stimulus packages that are emerging, including in Europe, and the strong green angle, in inverted comma, of these stimulus packages will play a fundamental role, an important role to accelerate the rollout and make sure that the pipeline of innovative projects that does not die out in a more cash restricted environment, but on the opposite, are incentivized, encouraged, and can be tested across. So we see it as an opportunity, in fact, as far as the carbon agenda and decarbonization is concerned.
I want you all to listen very carefully to the closing question, and I want to see who is going to volunteer to take this discussion forward. Of course, if you feel passionately, we'll have more than one volunteer on this. But coming through again from our audience is we've spoken about collaboration with energy players and how crucial that is. We've spoken about the need for policymakers, and of course that came through in the initial question that we put in terms of the poll to our audience on the Slido platform. But one thing is clear that we've got to look at, and that is costs. And it's really about bringing the financial sector into this equation and into the collaboration. Any easy fast tracking on bringing the financial sector into this play? Again, I'm going to take now to volunteers. Who feels most strongly about this question? Yes, Mahendra, there you go.
Yes, financial sector definitely has to play the role, and the developing country has to be supported, right? Like the chicken and egg. So developed countries should act as chicken, and they should support the egg developing country. And the demonstration project, they have to be created. And second one, my message would be, though we would be thinking about net zero transition, but it should be just net zero transition. Let us think about society, economy, and the global warming. Thank you.
We've got time to take one more reaction on that question. Any takers?
Yes, if I may.
Okay, Cedric.
I think in order to answer the first question, fast tracking, how we bring on the financial sector, I think it's the foundation there is to develop coherent metrics and measurement tools. And this needs to be done together with industry, sector by sector. In Europe, we're working on the so-called taxonomy. It's complex, but equipping the financial sector with the right metrics is fundamental and the only way to accelerate this onboarding of the financial sector.
Wonderful. And I think on that note, we're just going to look at a closing session. It has certainly been incredibly interesting to get all the industry players across the board, and just reminding you who we have had on this panel. I mean, this certainly has been experts in the materials sector across the board. We were joined by Mahindra Senghi, the CEO of Dalmia Cement, India. And just reiterating that Dalmia Cement is one of the most active and innovative climate leaders in the Indian business world and part of the leadership group for industry transition. Thank you very much for your time, sir. Jörg Unger, who is Senior Vice President, Corporate Technology and Operational Excellence, BASF Germany. BASF, the largest chemicals producer in the world, and has been one of the sector's leaders in addressing the sector's greenhouse gas emissions. Amélie Henyon, Managing Director, Aluminium Dunkirk, Alvins. And Aluminium Dunkirk is the largest aluminium smelter in Europe, and together with its parent company, Alvins, has been working actively in improving aluminium's carbon footprint. Nikita Vorobyev, who is the Environmental Affairs Director, NLMK Group, Russian Federation. NLMK is the largest steel producer in Russia and exports its products across the globe to over 30 countries. And Cedric Demus, he is the head, Group Public Affairs and Government Relations, Lafarge Holcim Switzerland. Lafarge is one of the best known building materials companies with a large cement business and has been leading the sector's decarbonization efforts. You couldn't have asked for a better panel of experts to lead this discussion. Thank you very, very much for joining us. And I would love you all as audience participants to share your feedback on the Slido platform. Again, please go to www.slido.com and enter the hashtag Industry Transition Day, or you can scan the QR code. We would love to have feedback on this session, remembering that, of course, the next session will be in 30 minutes. That's at 1:30 CET. Thank you very much again to all our panelists for the robust discussion and taking the step in driving the materials industry to a transitioning industry. Thank you very much.
Thank you.